The light in the small bedroom never changed. It stayed low and filtered, even in the middle of the day, because the blinds were always drawn. Medical supplies lined the dresser. A feeding pump hummed beside the bed. A wheelchair sat in the corner, decorated with stuffed animals and bright ribbons that made the room look more like a pediatric clinic than a home. In the middle of it all was a girl who looked far younger than she actually was, her body thin, her voice soft, and her mother hovering nearby with a sweetness that felt almost forced. Anyone walking in would think they were seeing a child fighting a lifetime of illness. But nothing in that room was what it appeared to be. This was Springfield, Missouri, and for almost 2 decades, Dee Dee Blanchard had built a world around her daughter that revolved entirely around sickness. She told neighbors that Gypsy had leukemia, muscular dystrophy, seizures, developmental delays, and more conditions than most physicians saw in a month. Dee Dee spoke with the confidence of a caregiver who had memorized every diagnosis. She carried binders of medical records, pushed Gypsy's wheelchair through charity events, and cheerfully accepted the attention, donations, and support that followed. Organizations built them a Habitat for Humanity home. Charities sent them to Disney World. Doctors marveled at the girl's resilience, and Dee Dee reassured them she could handle whatever came next. But behind the sweet voice and the smiling pink outfits, Dee Dee controlled every part of Gypsy's life. She shaved her daughter's head to maintain the appearance of chemotherapy. She convinced doctors to perform procedures, not because Gypsy needed them, but because Dee Dee insisted on them. Feeding tubes, medications, breathing treatments, surgeries, and Gypsy, told she was years younger than she really was, believed she was as sick as her mother claimed. She learned to obey, to stay quiet, and to rely on her mother for everything. Her world was reduced to a bedroom, a wheelchair, and a list of illnesses she never actually had. As Gypsy grew older, cracks began forming in the life Dee Dee built. She noticed she could walk just fine when her mother wasn't around. She realized she could eat without the feeding tube Dee Dee insisted she needed. She began to question her age after finding paperwork that didn't match the birthday Dee Dee had told her. But every time she tried to push back, every time she hinted at independence, Dee Dee tightened control. She'd take away Gypsy's computer, keep her inside the house for days, or threaten that doctors wouldn't help her anymore if she misbehaved. To the outside world, Dee Dee looked devoted. Inside the home, she monitored Gypsy like a warden. Gypsy found her first real window to the outside world through a shared computer and a secret Facebook account. She joined online groups late at night, typing quietly while her mother slept. Those messages introduced her to people who didn't treat her like a patient or a child. Among them was Nicholas Godejohn, a socially isolated man from Wisconsin, with his own history of mental health challenges. Their relationship escalated quickly. Messages turned into fantasies, fantasies into plans. Gypsy told him the truth. She wasn't as sick as people thought. She could walk. She wasn't a child. And she was trapped. The more they talked, the more desperate she became. She wanted a life she'd been denied. Freedom, adulthood, anything beyond the hospital equipment and constant supervision. But Gypsy believed she couldn't simply leave. Dee Dee held all her documents, all her records, all her access to the outside world. Everyone believed Dee Dee over her. If Gypsy ran and claimed she was fine, who would listen? Dee Dee had charmed doctors and social workers for years. She kept medical files that backed up her story. She knew how to convince people that she was the only one protecting her fragile daughter. In June 2015, Gypsy and Nicholas put a plan into motion that would change everything. Nicholas traveled to Springfield and waited until Dee Dee fell asleep. Gypsy hid in the bathroom with her fingers in her ears, while Nicholas walked down the hallway with a kitchen knife. The attack was fast and violent. Dee Dee was stabbed multiple times in her bed, left in a room filled with the evidence of the life she had built. The home that had looked like a shrine to caregiving became a crime scene within minutes. After the killing, Gypsy and Nicholas fled on a bus back to Wisconsin. But the shock came when a strange message appeared on the shared Facebook account Gypsy and Dee Dee used. It read like a threat or a confession, alarming neighbors enough to call the police. When officers entered the Blanchard home, they found Dee Dee dead and Gypsy missing. For hours, investigators believed the young woman had been kidnapped. It wasn't until police traced the IP address of the Facebook post that they discovered Gypsy alive, walking, and fully capable in a way no one expected. The truth unraveled quickly. Doctors had long suspected Munchausen by proxy, a form of abuse where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in a child. But Dee Dee always managed to deflect those concerns. Now, investigators saw the pattern clearly. Unnecessary procedures, forged documents, multiple doctors, constant relocation, and a carefully curated image that kept people from asking hard questions. Gypsy hadn't been a helpless patient. She had been a victim of long-term medical abuse. The public struggled to make sense of the case. On one hand was Dee Dee's murder, brutal and intentional. On the other was the reality of what Gypsy endured, years of isolation, manipulation, and fabricated illness that robbed her of childhood, autonomy, and identity. Prosecutors weighed those factors heavily. Instead of a life sentence, Gypsy received 10 years for second-degree murder. Nicholas, who carried out the killing, received life without parole. In the years since, Gypsy has spoken openly about her past. She explained how it felt to grow up believing she might die at any moment, how every movement outside the wheelchair felt like a secret, and how the only escape she could imagine at the time was the one that ended with her mother's death. She has said she regrets the murder, but not the freedom that followed. For the first time in her life, she can choose her own clothes, eat what she wants, and walk outside without fearing punishment. The story of Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard is remembered not just for the crime, but for the hidden abuse that drove it. It exposed how easily protective systems can be manipulated, how powerful a caregiver's narrative can become, and how isolation can cut someone off from any chance at intervention. What happened in that small Missouri home didn't begin with violence. It ended with it, after years of control that nobody saw for what it really was until it was too late. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.